Hello and welcome to this week's video where I'll be making a plush of Shadow's pet Chao. Now I haven't made a plushie since Dolly for B Plays, and even then Dolly is quite simple in design, so making this Chao was a new kind of challenge. A challenging challenge? No, not really. Little kid me used to sew little scrap fabric creatures all the time. So if there's one thing I'm most comfortable with sewing, it's plushes. Anyway, I drew the pattern by hand, and in hindsight I should have recorded the drawing part, but alas, Con Crunch had caught up to me and I didn't know if I'd be spending the time to make this into a video or not. Which, to anyone paying attention to my words right now, why not leave a comment below telling me who your favourite Sonic character is and what your favourite Sonic game is. So, with my pattern pieces, I split them up into separate colour groups and cut them out of their respective colour fleece fabrics. And I'm doing the version of Shadow's Chao that has the purple bat wings that's depicted in the official Sonic channel artworks, so I had to pull out some old purple fleece for that. Since pretty much all the pieces were cut out then and there, the next thing to do was just go ham on the sewing machine for possibly 8 hours. Now, unlike Dolly, which was entirely hand sewn, Chao was mostly machine sewn outside of hand sewing on markings, eyes, sewing together the very back of the head, and attaching limbs. So expect to see this camera angle for basically the rest of the video. So I first started off with assembling the head because it was the most complicated part of this plushie, and if my pattern proportions were off, I'd much rather take the easier route of resizing the body and limbs than have to attempt altering the size of the head. Now, I can't explain exactly what's happening, but I first sewed together the pieces that made up the face area, and the 3 panels that made up the front of the head also each made up a part of the 3 spikes on the back of the head. So then I was able to move straight on to attaching all the pattern pieces that would create the rest of the 3 spikes. Once all the head pieces were attached together, I pushed the sewing machine back to start work on assembling the ears, since these would need to be sewn into a seam between the face panels and the top spike. I forgot the name of the stitch I'm using to attach the red stripe, but yeah, I had to do this to all 4 of the ear pieces. But as for sewing the ears together, I just did that on the sewing machine. Back to hand sewing though, I had to sew the ears into place and also sew all the bases of the spikes together, which, when I was originally drawing the pattern, I hadn't visualised exactly how the back was all going to come together, and knew it would just have to be a thing to figure out when the project was in front of me. I always save my fabric scraps for projects like this because man, the plushes need a lot of stuffing, but after stuffing the head, it became clear that more fabric was needed at the back, so the spikes wouldn't get pulled back so far. So I cut out an extra bit of fabric to sew in there, and it looked pretty good and intentional. Okay, things should roll a bit faster now that the head is constructed. This is the body, which I'm marking dots onto and then going over on the machine. I put the 2 pieces back together and then sewed them up, but leaving a gap at the neck area. I then stuffed it and hand sewed the red mark onto the chest. Working on the feet, I sewed the red strips onto the bottom foot piece and the tops of the feet to the top of the red strips, of course leaving a gap at the heel to turn them inside out. I also decided to sew the tail whilst the machine was threaded with red thread. The machine got pushed aside again so I could stuff the feet and attach them to the body, and since the tail was there, I attached that too. Just like with the ears, I had to hand sew the red stripes onto all 4 panels before sewing the arms together on the sewing machine, flipping them inside out and hand sewing them to the headless body. And no, I've not cut any footage out, we've gone straight from sewing arms on to sewing wings on, so I must have forgotten to record me making the wings. The last detail to add was the eyes, which I decided to do with felt fabric instead of fleece, and there's not really a whole lot I can say on this, to be honest. The last thing to do was sew the head on, and boom. Here's my Chao plushie. Yeah, I didn't bother making the orb, but I don't think the floating orb translates nicely over to plush form, so I'd rather just edit it into any serious photos I might take. But how did I do? I'd say I did well for what's probably my most complicated plushie yet. Now, if you did like the plushie and want to help more people see it, then interact with the video by leaving a like, commenting, subscribing, and sharing the video link with friends. But that'll be all. I edited this a day before Comic-Con, so hopefully this isn't poorly edited. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.